Could many, if not most, English translations of the Bible contain a fatal mistranslation of Daniel's prophecy about the tribulation? What is scary is that this mistranslation is found in what many call the most important prophecy in the whole Bible, the 70 weeks prophecy. This prophecy details the first and second coming of Jesus. Today, top Hebrew scholars will help properly translate those verses for us so you can see what it really says. And when you see it, it may change the way you interpret the prophecy, and maybe it will change your mind about the tribulation, like maybe it has already started. This is Bible teacher Nelson Walters, and you're probably wondering why I said it was a fatal mistranslation. Why this is the scariest truth about Daniel's prophecy. Well, according to Jesus himself, in the parable of the 10 virgins, Matthew 25, 1 through 13, this single mistranslation may be part of what costs millions of people their lives, and worse than that, their eternal life. Jesus tells us millions of good, well-meaning churchgoers may go to hell and miss out on the wedding supper of the Lamb because they're asleep at the beginning of a tribulation and can't prepare themselves. And all of this, perhaps because of a few mangled words in a 2,500-year-old book of the Bible. Now, if you're the one who knew this was happening, what would you do about it? You'd scream it from the rooftops, right? You'd let everybody know. That is exactly what God wants Christians to do, by the way. Look at Ezekiel 33:6. But if the watchman sees the sword coming and does not blow the trumpet, so that people are not warned, and the sword comes and takes any one of them, that person is taken away in his iniquity, but his blood and that's God speaking, will require at the watchman's hand. You may already know this verse, but if you don't, it essentially says God will hold us responsible if we know judgment is coming and we don't warn people about it. If we see a horrible event coming and say nothing, then we are responsible. In this particular instance, the event is the start of the tribulation. Knowing that it has started gives people a chance to prepare mentally, spiritually, physically, emotionally for wars, famine, pestilence, earthquake, mark of the beast, and most importantly, for the return of Jesus so that you're saved at that moment. Not knowing these things are coming may be why 50% of the Christians in the parable of the 10 virgins wake up too late and miss the wedding of the Lamb. The number one reason I've been given why people are rejecting our theory about the tribulation having started back on October 2nd and 3rd is this particular mistranslation. They tell me that what I've been teaching is not what the Bible says. I'm trusting the Bible, they say, over what a common YouTuber like you would have to say. And guess what? They're correct. Let that sink in. Most of our English translations of the Bible say something different than what we've been teaching on this channel. But those translations are not the true Bible. The true Bible is the underlying Hebrew words given to the prophet Daniel by the angel Gabriel himself 2,500 years ago. That's the Bible. And maybe it says something different than what you have on your desk or nightstand at home. On my desk is the New American Standard Bible, one of the best word-for-word translations out there. It says this verse, Daniel 9:27, reads like this: "And he will make a firm covenant with the many for 1 week." The King James Version, maybe the most respected version, says, "And he shall confirm a covenant with the many for 1 week." And both are wrong. The he doesn't make or confirm anything. And you don't have to take my word for it. We have experts to back me up on this today. The Antichrist doesn't make the covenant with Israel, and his actions are likely behind the scenes and he is invisible to the world at this time. We don't know who he is. Today we're going to show you how this mistranslation probably happened and what Hebrew scholars told us this verse actually says about what the Antichrist does and doesn't do, who the many may be. Is it Israel or is it someone else? And whether or not we can know who the Antichrist is right now. And steel yourself, because what they say will shatter the mental picture you've had of what happens in Daniel 9:27 all these years. These English translations give the impression that a he, who most believe is the Antichrist, sits down at the beginning of the tribulation at a negotiating table and makes a binding covenant with Israel. This is the picture that popular books like Left Behind or The Late Great Planet Earth have popularized. That nearly every Christian has that picture in their mind. And because of this, they also imagine that they will recognize the covenant when they see it, and thus would know when the tribulation begins. But if they're wrong about just this one verse, in fact, it's about one word, they wouldn't recognize the tribulation had begun and wouldn't start to prepare themselves, their families, and their churches for what's coming. That's really serious stuff. Because we've known about this translation issue for some time, we have used the translation of Hebrew scholar Dr. Emmanuel Tov to help us understand what Daniel 9:27 really says. We could probably do a whole video on Tov's credentials, but he is the preeminent Hebrew scholar in the world today. He's the emeritus professor, Department of the Bible at Hebrew University in Jerusalem, editor-in-chief of the Dead Sea Scrolls Project, expert on the Septuagint, etc., etc. Now, a member of our ministry's advisory board, Fisherman, reached out to him personally 4 or 5 years ago. Tov humbly stated to us that Daniel 9:27 is a difficult translation because the verb in the sentence, vavhigbir, is in the hefel form, which doesn't exist in English, or Greek for that matter. It's best translated in this verse as, and these are Dr. Tov's exact words, quote, he will cause to strengthen the covenant, end of quote. That is the translation for the first part of Daniel 9:27, and we've used that ever since. So quick shout out to Fisherman and other members of our advisory team who helped with this, Michael Tarrin and Ryan Rigo. Now, it's important to understand the distinction that Tov makes between direct action and causation. The Antichrist in this verse doesn't actively perform the verb's action. Rather, it implies that he influences or initiates a strengthening or enforcing of that covenant behind the scenes through less direct means, like a puppet master. The action isn't in the spotlight, on TV, or obvious in any other way. It's the difference between me mowing my grass myself or causing the lawn service to mow my yard for me. Now, in 1971, John Walrood, the father of the preacher rapture here in the U.S., interpreted this verse as highlighting the Antichrist's role in enforcing a pre-existing agreement or covenant rather than creating something entirely new. So these two esteemed scholars, Walrood and Tov, who know more about Hebrew than you and I ever will, bring up two very important points. One, that the Antichrist doesn't make the covenant, rather he enforces a pre-existing covenant. And two, that he likely does it behind the scenes covertly and doesn't reveal himself at that time. And these two aren't the only scholars pointing out our modern English translations miss the mark in translating this verse. Bible scholar Dr. Gleason Archer notes, the Hebrew verb higbir can imply the idea of, quote, to cause to prevail or to cause to make strong. Hebrew scholar Dr. Michael Brown comments on the idea of a pre-existing covenant that's enforced. Quote, the word here, vahigbir, means to strengthen or confirm a covenant, not necessarily a new one. The idea is of enforcing or making effective an agreement that already exists. Dr. John Goldingay, Old Testament scholar and writer of Daniel in the World Bible Commentary, adds to this, quote, "The verb higbir here can denote make strong, or perhaps in a sense of enforcing or imposing a treaty. It could imply an act of compulsion rather than voluntary agreement," end of quote. So all these scholars present a picture of an Antichrist behind the scenes who's causing a pre-existing covenant to be forced on someone else. Much different than what you've seen in the movies, but it is entirely consistent with what you have seen happen in the world this fall. With your own eyes, you have witnessed and are witnessing this happen. On September 22nd, 2024, the United Nations approved the Pact for the Future, the most powerful secular covenant of all time. That, we believe, is the pre-existing covenant that the Antichrist, whoever he may be, will cause to enforce. Then, on the Feast of Trumpets, October 3rd, a 90-nation international alliance was formed to use that covenant or pact for the future to enforce a two-state solution on Israel. This enforcement began on the exact first day of the Hebrew year, so that the enforcement can take place for all 7 years of the covenant. This is exactly what Daniel 9:27 says. Nothing more, nothing less. Now, who's the mysterious he? Well, we don't know. It could be anyone. Mohammed bin Salman, who organized that alliance. Trump, now he's president. Macron, Prince Charles, Obama, the Pope. A nameless person who hasn't surfaced yet. Any one of these folks could be behind it. Any one of them could be causing it. So the Antichrist doesn't make the covenant. And we don't know who he is right now because he's strengthening it covertly. This means the Bible translations you know and trust are likely wrong about this verse, a fatal mistranslation if you keep believing it. It shouldn't surprise us that something in the book of Daniel might be mistaken because, remember, the book of Daniel tells us itself that its meaning is hidden until the time of the end, especially regarding timing. Daniel 12:9, he said, "Go your way, Daniel, for the words are secret and sealed until the time of the end." So, the meaning of the words in Daniel are sealed up until the time of the end, until probably the tribulation. Could that hiding of the truth happen through accepted and revered translations? And could the right understanding be happening right now? We think that's probably true in both cases. But before we bring additional Hebrew experts to discuss the other problem with the verse, who the covenant is made with, the many, let's look at the history of the verse like a detective, like Sherlock Holmes. What is the oldest translation of the verse into another language that we have? The answer is Greek, from about 300 to 200 BC. And although Greek doesn't have that same verb tense, like we said before, and can't imply the causality as well as it should, the three versions of the Septuagint say either he will strengthen the covenant or he will prevail the covenant. The Aramaic Peshitta, written like maybe 100 years after Jesus' resurrection, says, "And he shall strengthen the covenant." So the earliest translations are more like what our experts say than what our Bibles today say. So where did this idea of confirm a covenant or make a covenant come from? The Catholic Church authorized Jerome to translate the Bible into Latin 250 years after the Peshitta, and this is what Jerome came up with. "And he shall confirm the covenant with many 1 week." So it's a Catholic-approved idea. Also notice that these are the exact same words as the King James. This shouldn't be surprising because the King James Version was based in large part on that Latin Vulgate. And since then, very few translations have been willing to go against the translation of the King James Version. Well, how could revered translations trust tradition over what the words actually say? How could a translator or a team of translators intentionally choose a translation that isn't literal. Translations are based on what the words say and how previous translations have rendered those same Hebrew words. And many times, the tradition trumps what the words actually say. Here is a real-life example. Bible scholar Travis Snow explained this example of tradition trumping the best translation in a conversation he and I had about 4 years ago. Let's listen.
When Dr. Michael Rydelnik, who's an Old Testament scholar, was working on the translation for the Holman Christian Standard Bible, which is the HCSB, I believe you can find this on different Bible apps and whatnot, but he was working on this translation, and like a lot of scholars who look at the issue of Gog versus Agag in Numbers 24:7, he came to the conclusion that this should be interpreted in the HCSB as Gog. And almost every scholar who takes a serious look at this actually agrees. So he went to the editor and he made a petition and he tried to convince the editor to change the translation in Numbers 24:7 to Gog instead of Agag. And he shares that the editor actually said he agreed with him, but he said he couldn't change it just ultimately because of tradition, and that it would be too hard to try to convince, I don't know if it was the publisher or other editors, it would be too hard to try and change the reading, even though the manuscript evidence favors Gog. So it's kind of a classic example of how interpretive traditions work their way into the translation of our English Bibles. And we need to be careful about that, and we need to recognize that what we're reading in a lot of cases is an interpretation just as much as a true translation.
Dr. Rydelnik shared that it's hard for translators to change tradition. I imagine that conversations like what Dr. Rydelnik mentioned happened as other new translations were being formulated. Maybe things like this were said. This verse seems to say something else, but if we say that, people will question why our new translation is different than the King James. Maybe we better just keep it like the King James. So that is probably how I believe this translation was passed down over and over and over to many of the translations we have today. Then someone like Dr. Tim LaHaye used the mistaken translation to write a book like Left Behind, and he sold 80 million copies. One biblical error around 400 AD multiplying. Unfortunately, neither Jerome nor LaHaye realized that it might be a fatal mistranslation, causing nearly the entire Christian church to miss the start of the tribulation because they were looking for the wrong thing. This brings us to the rest of the Hebrew scholars and what they have to say about the many. Are they Israel or are they another group? Here again, the actual Hebrew word used, labarim, the many, gives us a clue. There are two words the angel Gabriel could have used to signify the many, Rab or Am, and he chose Rab, which most scholars agree opens the possibility of referring to a large and potentially inclusive group rather than limiting the scope to just Israel. Old Testament scholar CLCO notes, Rab emphasizes quantity and scope in contrast to the word Am, which conveys national or ethnic specificity. The use of labarim in Daniel 9:27 may indicate an intention to point to a multitude well beyond Israel. John Goldingay, another prominent scholar on the book of Daniel, echoes this. The word Rab emphasizes extent rather than a particular ethnicity, leaving open the possibility that the many are not exclusively Israel, but may include Gentiles. This is exactly what happened. If you haven't noticed, on September 2024, a covenant was made with Israel, but not Israel alone. The pact for the future was made with the entire world and Israel. So when people say the Antichrist makes a covenant with Israel to launch the tribulation, they're actually mistaken on all 3 points. The covenant isn't made by the Antichrist. The covenant isn't made just with Israel. The Antichrist rather enforces or strengthens an existing covenant made by others, and it's made with a much broader group. However, as we pointed out previously, the covenant will be enforced upon Israel. Now, you probably are thinking to yourself, hey, Daniel 9:27 is found in a context of the 70 weeks, which is all about God's people in the holy city, Jerusalem. And that's how the covenant can be in that section and still not be made directly with Israel. Now, you probably noticed none of this is what the book Left Behind has burned into our subconsciouses. In fact, there are 7 total problems with Left Behind and what the Hebrew words of Daniel actually say. Click here to keep watching and discover what those mistaken notions are so you can evaluate for yourself if the tribulation has actually begun. Till then, this is Nelson, and I'll see you there.